Hi everyone, my name is Wisam Naoum. I'm running for state representative in the 30th district. That is the western half of Sterling Heights, all of Utica, and then a little bit of Shelby Township. Now, have any of you today heard of the Mick Mulvaney sort of controversy that came out today? Yes. So, to those of you that aren't aware, Mick Mulvaney is the head of the CFPB, former congressman. It's the entity that is there to protect consumers and us from big banks and financiers in the economy. He has a little plan to sort of implode it from within, but he was talking to bankers today, and he was advising them on how best to roll back regulations from the Dodd-Frank Act, which came into place after the Great Recession. What he said was really interesting. He said, when lobbyists would come to him as a congressman and they didn't give him a donation, he wouldn't talk to them. And then if they did give him a donation, he might talk to them, and we'll put might in quotations because he ended up doing that all the time. And that little quote gives you an insight into the way our politics is going, not just at the national level, but at the state level as well. I'll give you an example of that. In 2016, there was a situation where you had a Republican legislator realize the situation in Detroit for the charter schools was really bad. They didn't have accountability, they didn't have any oversight. So he put together a bipartisan bill to actually work on that problem. Now, you'll probably know this name, but the DeVos family didn't like that very much. And over the course of 2 months, they dumped in $1.45 million into Republican campaign coffers. And that bill that had bipartisan support, which Henry can probably talk about, it died. And then that never happened. And who lost in that situation? The kids of Detroit. Who won in that situation? The billionaire family. That's a problem. And we talk about that, but the word we don't often use to describe that is that's actually corruption. Right. And we should acknowledge it as such. Yeah. Racism. And for me, I can talk about that a lot because I came from that world. I spent 5 years as a finance lawyer in Chicago after I went to law school here and then moved on. And so I saw that stuff firsthand. Some of you have heard this story, but I'll tell it to those of you that haven't heard it. But when I was a first year at one of these major corporate law firms, I was sitting in on one of these deals, and what I worked on was mergers and acquisitions from the banking side of those deals. And so I'm sitting in this phone call between private equity guys and bankers, and they're going to war, fighting over how this deal was going to shape up. And it's about 3 hours long. They're at each other's throats. It's going really poorly. I'm thinking in my head that this deal is going to die, nothing's going to happen, so on and so forth. But as they're discussing the way they're going to measure the company that's being bought, and they were talking about cash flow as the way to measure that, this phrase comes up: cost savings and synergies. I had no idea what it meant, so I started frantically Googling on my phone. I can't find anything. And the conversation shifts to the point where they become super chummy. They find a number, they agree on it, the rest of the negotiation ends in about 15 minutes, and the deal's pretty much done. And so I'm sitting there thinking, how do we get to a complete 180 where they were about to kill each other, and now they're best of friends? And so the call ends, and the partner looks at me, and they're not very nice typically, and I was lollygagging trying to see if I could ask him the question, and he looks at me and goes, well, why are you still here? And I go, well, I don't know what this phrase means. And it's clear that this phrase is really important. And so he looks at me and just goes, close the door. And when a partner at a big law firm tells that to you, you're either in trouble or you're about to hear something really awful. It was the latter in this case. So he closes the door, or I close the door, and he looks at me and just says, cost savings and synergies means we're going to go in and we're going to lay everyone off once we buy the company. And I grew up on 14 and Ryan. It's a working class neighborhood. I grew up around the folks that get laid off. Right. And then I was working with the people that were getting their bonuses off laying those people off.
That's awful.
I had a problem with that. So I decided to leave, and I came home. And for me, right, everyone talks about the issues. You know, whether it's making sure people have their pensions, whether it's how we're going to fix the potholes, whether how we're going to beef up our paychecks, whether our pupils in school are going to get the money they need to learn what they need. But the reality is, we can't even do those things until we address the corruption and the greed in Lansing. And so for me, the platform is really simple. Combat political corruption, combat corporate greed, and it's everything that you guys were talking about today, whether it's the water from Nestle, whether it's the roads, whether it's whatever it is. Net neutrality, for instance, whatever it is, it ties back to that money. Because those guys that get those bonuses, the next thing that they do is they turn around and they dump that money into our politics. And you saw with that DeVos example, that happens every day. Let's clean that up. And that's what I'm running on. Thank you.